Hey, you! Welcome to the Worth Reading podcast, the no boring zone where we get you all excited about books that are worth reading.
On the What Reading podcast, you get some unbiased take on books, juicy scoops of what runs through the minds of your favorite author. You can call us your virtual book connoisseurs that help you filter through the many books out there and let you know the ones worth reading.
On this podcast, we talk about different book genres. We do not discriminate, from fiction to non-fiction, poetry, biographies, memoirs, you name it, so long as it is written by an author of African descent and project our authentic African stories and realities. You can't count us in. So welcome on board and thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Worth Reading podcast. It's so good to have you guys listen to us and hear what we have to say about books written by African authors. And as we continue to spotlight all of their efforts and dispel that narrative that where you want to hide something from an African, you put it in the book. I have with me here Toby, she has always been on every episode we've recorded, and a very, very, very special author to us. And I'm sure that by the time you guys listen to this episode, you see why she holds a very special place in our hearts as well. Hey, Toby, what's up?
Hey Shay, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so lovely to have you here. And very excited about this episode, like Shay rightly mentioned, because of the guests that we've got on this particular show. I don't want to tell the story that led to us getting now to actually sit down with us, but hopefully by the time you hear the conversation from start to finish, you understand why. And our book has been the wave of the moment and is still actually sustaining that momentum. Our guest today is Onyi Nwabineli. I hope I got the pronunciation of the last name right. Hi, Onye.
Hello.
Hey.
Toby, Shay, thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much, Oye. You're so energetic and so full of positive vibes, and we always love authors that bring their most authentic self to our show. So we definitely hope that this chat would be as exciting as we imagined. And your debut someday maybe. I'm sure you've probably talked about it in 1,001 times. I'm so my mind, I'm just imagining like, okay, maybe I already have some key messaging or scripts, like the usual generic responses I give everyone, but we want the juice on this particular episode, and the juice we must get. So,
Okay.
tell us, Oye, what are you most excited about currently, apart from the fact that you've written a book that everyone seems to connect with? I don't know if you've got anything to share with us before we get into the meat of the matter. If that makes sense.
Well, I think the big thing for me, it's still very surreal to me. I still actually can't believe that you're holding a book that I wrote. It's still a dream. It feels like a dream still. For me, I still can't believe it. And the reception that the book has had is just very overwhelming in the best possible way, because I didn't think it would be as big as it is. And it's just like the paperback is just about to come out in the States in just early next year. So it's such a huge thing. And every day I wake up, I'm like, I pinch myself. I'm like, did this actually happen? And it did. And it never gets old. So yeah, it's pretty exciting for me.
Wow, this is you trying to be modest. And in my mind, I'm like, is she really this humble? She wrote a masterpiece, for crying out loud. She is the master of words. Like, she got us thinking of all sorts and, feeling such palpable emotions with her words. And here she is saying she still can't believe it. I'm like, hey, what? Anyways.
Yeah, so
Literally,
talking about how surreal it feels. Sometimes I go through our stats and see that we actually have listeners in about 22 countries and 6 continents.
wow.
So when we review books, I imagine some new person somewhere in Argentina, for instance, just catching on to the gist about this book and being like, okay, I think I need to get this book. And that's
Yeah.
one thing I've come to learn about the beauty of books. We grew up reading books by Sidney Sheldon and all of the meals and bones that some people, made become their Bibles. And in our minds, we could see ourselves on the streets of London or the streets of some far remote
Yeah.
country in Southeast Asia or Southern Europe, for instance. And I see, what you wrote. I see how one of the things that I liked about the book was how you infuse some elements of cultural conversations. So I don't understand Igbo, but I see whenever I see those lines coming, whenever I see
Mm.
some of the characters blot out some of those lines in their exchanges, I smile because I know how that would feel for some Igbo guy in the far-flung, town of Saskatoon in Canada, for instance, and
Oh shit.
just saying that, oh yeah, that's my person. I understand that word, and that's how
Yeah, the
powerful.
resonance.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's how powerful literature is, and that's how powerful the work that you've done with this book is. So I would say that it's such a brilliant work, and the title is so unusual, but it's something that just piques your curiosity, and you're like, okay, what's it about this book? Why someday maybe, for instance, but when you dive into it, you realize that indeed someday maybe
Mm.
ellipsis.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Without giving away spoilers. But you know what? We're actually going to get into spoilers of this. I'm sorry, guys, if you haven't read it, go buy it now. And then
Go buy it.
get back to
Yeah,
this episode and you can be like, oh, I see what they were talking about. Because
yeah.
you can't get to the depth of it without getting into some spoilers. I'm sorry. And Toby and Shay, they deserve all the juice, like they said. So yeah.
We're going to squeeze the
Yeah.
juice out. So, first thing I would like to ask is why someday maybe? I can
I mean,
imagine you've heard that question 1,001 times because it's not your typical title. So I'll
mm.
make it two questions. Why someday maybe? Why did you explore that theme? The theme you explored with the book.
As in why someday maybe the title.
Yeah, why someday maybe the title, and then why the theme you explored.
Okay, so Someday Maybe was not the original title.
Mm.
The original title was something different, far more literary. But what I knew going in is that I said, let me just have 2 or 3 alternative titles in my back pocket, just in
Okay.
case my publishers wanted to try something else. Because I don't know, I didn't know this, but I've learned it very quickly that publishers actually have a big say in what the title of your novel is. If they do
Okay.
Yeah.
not, if they change the title of your novel, you're gonna change it. So I said, let me have 2 or 3 alternatives that I like, that they can play around with. And so when they came back to me and said, we do like the title, but do you have anything else that's kind of a little bit catchier? And I said, actually, I do have something else. And here it is. It's Someday Maybe, which is a refrain in the book. So it just made
Mm.
sense. And they loved it. And that's what it was, pretty quickly. And then for your second question, why I wrote a book about grief.
Grief.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, actually, I had not planned to write a book about grief. But what happened quite a long time ago, one of my friends, her husband actually did take his own life,
Oh
quite
wow.
unexpectedly. He did leave a note. And in supporting her through her grief, she just kept saying to me, she's like, I want you to write about this, about how I'm feeling. And I was
So
like,
you
I
were
can't I
B.
can't do that. I cannot do that. I haven't lost a spouse, and I haven't lost a spouse to suicide. So I don't think I could do that justice. But she just kept saying over and over again, you need to write about this. And you can't really say no to a widow, especially a widow that you love. So um in the end, what I did for her is I put together something. It wasn't a novel. It was very short. It was like 20 pages, of
Okay.
vignettes and so on. And she loved it. So I went away and came up with a plot, characters, so on and so forth. And that's how Someday Maybe was born. But it is very fictional. It's not based on her, but she was the inspiration. It's a gift
I
to
was going.
her.
I was going to ask. I was going to ask if you were B.
Oh no. Well, you know what? People ask me a few times and they're like, who are you in the book? And I'm like, well, there's bits of me in all the characters. So yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's bits of you in B, but interesting to
yeah,
note.
yeah. There's bits of me in B. There's bits of me in Eve. There's bits of me in Nate, who is my favorite character, by the way.
Yeah.
Nate
Oh,
Hyde. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's bits of me in Louisa. So yeah,
Okay.
exciting. And it's interesting to hear that you've got friends or you decided to honor your friend by, actually writing about this particular subject matter that a lot of people find to be quite heavy.
yeah.
And oftentimes we just try to shy away from it. Like we don't even want to explore it as such. Right. And I'm just curious to know why your friend, I mean, I want to believe like you've always been a professional writer for the most part of your life or your career and all
Mhm.
of that. But we're just wondering if you want to take us to that journey that led you to this point where you became actually a published word. So a lot of people, a lot of writers that we've had on the show will tell us how, growing up, they've always read a lot of books and, well, writing wasn't something they thought they could do professionally. And then tell us how, it was just a chance or they went for
Mm.
some creative writing course and submitted like a 3,000 word initial chapter, blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on. So we want to hear your own journey to this point of getting published, if you do not mind sharing.
Of course. First of all, I love you, Toby. I am not a professional writer. I never have been. I have a day job. I have a separate, very intense day job.
Feels good.
Yeah, we do have. I have that, but
Yeah.
I'm not dissimilar to other writers that have spoken to you. I have always loved books. I have always written, though. I have always written since I was a child. Since I could pick up a pen, I have always written, and I was very fortunate that I have parents who saw something in me. And you know what it's like with Nigerian parents: doctor, lawyer, engineer.
Yes,
They
so.
said,
Oh boy.
they said
African
no.
parents are
Do you
legendary.
know what I mean? But no, my parents were they said, do you want it? They sat me down along with my siblings. They said, do any of you want to be a doctor? I said no. And then they said, only what do you want to do? You want to write. We know you want to write. And they've encouraged me ever since I was a child.
Wow.
So
Bless them.
they really poured into me. And I've written lots of different things that will never see the light of day. And I never want to see the light of day.
Haven't we all written all sorts of things that will
Oh
never see the
yeah.
light
Oh
of day?
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, and it was in lockdown, the first lockdown in London in I think 2020, um, where I had the manuscript there, and all my friends and my family were like, "Can you just do some? You've written the book. Just go and see if an agent is interested." And it was
Wow.
actually funny because there was a call out on Twitter. My
Mhm.
US publishers actually put an open call out and they said, unagented Black writers, if you have a book, send us the first 3 chapters and we'll critique it for you before you send it to agents. I said, perfect. That's a fantastic
Wow.
opportunity. So I sent it in and they said we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. They had about 2,000 or so people write into them, so they didn't get back to us in a couple of weeks. They actually didn't get back to me for 6 months. By which point I already had my agent, and when they did get back to me, they
Wow.
said, we see something in this book. Do you mind sending us the full manuscript? And I had to write them back and say, actually, I'm not unagented anymore. I have an agent. Here
Late
she
to
is
the
in
party.
copy. Yeah.
Mm.
And they said to my agent, whenever you send this book out for submission, can you put us at the top of the list, please? And they were the ones that actually ended up preempting and buying my like giving me my contracts. They were the ones that I went with.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Wow. Shout out to friends that actually nudge us and push us into the best fashion of
Do
ourselves.
you know what I mean?
Because
So it wasn't even nudging me. They were actually flogging me. They were like, if you don't do
I
this,
like people like that. I honestly know the value of such friendship. And I love how in your book as well, you actually explored friendship too as a theme. I just love
Yeah.
the synergy and the energy between Eve and B. And she's just surrounded by such good people and good vibes in spite of what she was going through. It's so amazing that she had like a community to support her, to hold her by the hands. And I think that's one of the things that is so beautiful about being African. We're very communal people. And unlike, like, of course, as an African girl that is still super proud of our roots, I definitely had my own fair share of culture shocks when I got here.
Yeah.
And even till date, like 3 years going to 4 years now, when I'm standing at the bus station and I still find it quite unusual that I can't even say hello or say, good morning, my
Yeah.
brother, or something. All of us, it's hard that I still find
Who's
it
your
quite
bro?
unusual that anybody there, Shay, you want to say it that way, right? I still find it
Who's your
unusual that I
bro?
do not know what my next door neighbor looks like. And
Yeah.
these are the people that,
Well,
you can't shy
I
away
think
from the fact that you will
that's
need
not
people at every point in your life. Yeah.
that's not
Shay, go
peculiar
on.
to being abroad, though. I think there are some cities in Nigeria that I've lived in Abuja for how many years now? Going on 10 years, and I've lived where I live now for about 4 years. And I'll be honest with you, I know someone knows someone that lives in the house to my right. I don't know anyone who lives in the house to my left. So I think
At least you
that,
still know
that
someone.
yeah, that behavior is beginning to seep into our own culture as well,
It is
because
a bad
of
thing, please.
yeah,
Let's
yeah,
call it out. No,
definitely
we
it's not a good
reject it.
thing, right? We grew up in community, but we are beginning to
Yeah.
learn individualism very, very as many of us are becoming adults, there's always that sense of awareness of the other person, and we just
Yeah.
tend to move into our own colony, our own personal colony, and stay in there. I don't know what has triggered it. Maybe it's the way the world is now, where almost no one trusts the other party,
Mm.
whether it's what social media
Mm.
has has taught us about being woke, right? But whatever it is, I don't think we're really going down the right pathway. Um, and
I'm
one
all
thing,
for balance because I'm like, as much as we're very communal people as Africans, I also think that can be quite nosy too.
Oh yeah.
Like we don't respect boundaries. Sorry
yeah,
to say,
everything
but
has its pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
People want to
so
be
it
Coming,
would be great
yeah,
for us to have like a
a
healthy
bit too
balance.
yeah,
much.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
There are always pros and cons. So individualism
yeah,
has very, very big cons. Where that's why nowadays you see in the news where they say someone passed on and had been in the house for many days, and the neighbors didn't
Mm.
realize until there's a stench coming
mm,
from there. It's beginning to happen in
mm,
Nigeria, right? So
mm,
that's a con of of being individualistic and not trying to have a community around you. But one of the things that I really want to ask about is how you came up with the character Aspen, mainly because that's a mix of racism and classism in
Yeah.
just one person. For many years, it didn't seem like that layer was ever going to be erased, and how
Mm.
sometimes I say that can either be grief is many times a unifier, right?
Mm.
Where
mm,
something sad occurs and it brings people together. Case in point, the recent death of the popular Nigerian musician Mobad, and how for many weeks there was some sort of coming together and trying to go against who they felt were the culprits, right? But in this case, Aspen never changed. Our
Yeah.
attitude, would never change. Our perspective and our way of life never changed. How did what made you come up with that character, for instance, in the book?
Well, I mean, Toby can probably testify. She's first of all, she is a witch, but at the same time, um, there's many of them here in the UK and the
Yeah.
world over.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
if you they're not uncommon. You just need to go to an office and you will
yeah,
encounter several Aspens. And they're even worse because they're not even rich like Aspen. They just assume they're better than you
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
by way of the color of their skin. I needed to put her in the book because I wanted one of the key things I wanted to explore in the book was, as you said, Shay, racism and classism. I wanted it to I mean, someday maybe at its core is a love story, right? But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
no love story is just peachy and
Perfect.
smooth through the
Yeah.
way like
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you encounter things, and especially when you're in, you know, an interracial relationship and issues of class come in, I wanted to address those things head on. And Aspen was a tool to do that, but she's also very realistic. Like I've dealt with Aspens. I deal with Aspens day to day. And it's like you said, sometimes grief is a great unifier, but the nature of their relationship made it so it just drove them further apart. And I didn't want it to be something that's, oh, it's water under the bridge now. No, you've been a witch to me, and you've continued to be a witch to me.
You
So
stay a witch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting. Look, something Toby and I touched on a bit prior to this conversation is how one of the directions I saw the book going in, which I loved a whole lot, is that part of grief where nobody really wants to talk about. There's an expectation of grief where everybody expects you to grieve for a period and then snap back to
Snap out of
normal,
there and pop on. Yeah.
right? And one thing I've come to learn is there are stages of grief and there are stages of agony. The closer the person is to your arm, the deeper it definitely will hurt, and the longer it may likely take you to come out of that situation. So, and sometimes when people, try to condole you and say, oh, sorry, and then, you begin to see the ink in their eyes that, okay, now it's okay. You should be done with this by now. Should be done with this by now. And that was something that I liked that you explored, where there was never you should be done with this with her. She really just wanted to. Well, at some point as a reader, you would feel like, oh, I think you're beginning to draw this thin, it's way too thin. But again, like I said, the closer someone is to your arms, the deeper the agony feels like, and trust me, the longer that grief will come to feel like. So yeah, I think I enjoyed that part of the book as much.
I'm sure for this particular element, Onye, you must have gotten mixed reactions from, readers. And I totally understand because, I mean, there were people, when I started the book, I was like, yeah, let's get into it. I'm like, yes, I'm finally getting, and then 100 pages in, still this matter. Hey, what next now? What's going to happen next? And I'm like, the only thing that actually kept me going was actually the fact that you're such a talented writer and the words were just giving me life. The way you were painting so many imageries and, the words were just taking a different life and different meanings for me. And so it wasn't like it was overflogged as far as I'm concerned, but I honestly felt that a number of people must have felt like,
oh yeah,
it's being dragged, and
absolutely.
there's at some points, I guess people are very much. I don't know if the word to use is bunch of optimists. Like people want books with happy ending, and we live in a fast-paced world now when people are like, so what's next? What's next? What's coming? Like I can't continue to linger on this bit. And all. So I'm just very interested in knowing how you've been able to navigate those negative reactions you perhaps must have gotten based on that particular style. Because I know it's definitely deliberate. It's deliberate that you really delved into it and you took your time. And all. So why? I mean, it's your book, too. Do what you like.
I mean, writers right for lots of writers, our books are our babies, right? But I went into this knowing that not everybody's going to like what I write, and that's perfectly fine. I don't need everybody to like what I write. What I wanted to write was an accurate representation of grief, and a lot of people might not think it's accurate because the society we live in doesn't give us the space and the time and the room to grieve like Eve decided to grieve for her husband. If I lost a spouse anyway, never mind through suicide, and I went through the things that Eve went, I would not leave my bed for I don't know how long. But because I have a job and we all have jobs and we have responsibilities and we don't want people to worry about us, and capitalism and all these kind of things, we're not allowed. We don't take the time. Your HR, your boss will call you in 48 hours and say, I need you back at your desk, and you have to be back at your desk. And Eve said no. Even though she was broken inside, and even though we can be broken inside, we still do what we feel like we have to do. And Eve just said, I'm not actually going to do that. I'm devastated. You don't understand how devastated I am. You don't know how guilty I feel. You don't know how broken I am. And the least I can do is mourn my husband in the way that I feel he deserves to be mourned. And yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. Like, for people on the outside, it's like, okay, yes, we've heard. But at the same time, who are you to tell anybody how long they're allowed to grieve for somebody?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I wanted people to look back at themselves and say,
Mm,
why am I having that reaction? Why do I feel like
mm,
she should be over it? Because
Yeah.
in the grand
mm.
scheme of things in the book, it wasn't that long. It was 9 months. 9 months to
Yeah.
grieve
Actually.
a spouse is
Hmm.
nothing.
There's
Mm.
nothing for someone that she
So
had
yeah,
for someone that she had been with for over 10 years. It's nothing.
yeah. There's nothing really.
Yeah.
And especially in the way and the method he chose and the way that he left the world, it's unless you've been through it yourself,
Yeah.
you really
Yeah.
cannot comment on how long
Uh,
somebody should be allowed to be broken for. And grief is such an overwhelming and an unwieldy collection of emotions. One day you could be feeling fine. One week you could be
Mm.
feeling fine. Then the next week something innocuous will happen. You hear a song on the radio and you're in pieces
Just
again.
triggers you.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
reality. So
Hmm.
yeah, I wanted to portray that in the book. And so people that are like, yeah, it's really depressing and it's heavy, and I'm like, yeah, it's all of those things, but that's reality.
I think
Yeah. A
I
bit.
think one thing that I would like to say about that, I won't drag this too far into the grief conversation, but like you said, that's reality. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that we never learn how to do, or we're not trained to do as friends, relatives, family, neighbors of grieving people, is we never know the right words. We never know the right actions. Every time it happens to me, every time you're in a position where you are trying to pacify someone that has lost either a close relative, whatever the kind of relationship, you are torn between, am I saying too little? Am I saying too much? Am I helping too little? Am I helping too much? Right. I recollect last year when my mom passed, and it felt like everyone talking should just keep quiet, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like the words were soothing anyways.
Yeah.
Yes, they were doing the best that they could at the time, credit to them, but it didn't mean that there were moments where you really just wanted everywhere to be quiet.
Yeah.
You really just wanted shrill silence, but
Mm.
people would
That's it.
feel that, oh, shrill silence will drive you into other realms, right? There are moments where you really just wanted to cry.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, like you rightly said, grief management is not something that is taught in schools. It's not something that, even if there were courses on it, it's not something you can actually really master, because the moment rubber hits the road and the person gets into those moods, you just allow them deal with it the best way that they can, actually.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think
Shay,
something
yeah,
you said there, like silence is underrated. Silence is
Exactly.
underrated.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't need anybody to say anything. Sometimes you just
Yeah.
need somebody to sit in the same room as you. So you just have
presence.
somebody there, but you don't have
Yeah.
to say anything.
Exactly.
And I think that's what I've learned anyway, like
Mm-hmm.
going through my own versions of grief and then supporting people that have grieved. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to actually say anything. Sometimes you just need to hold somebody's hand or ask them, what is it that you need? Like I asked my friend, she didn't want
Mm-hmm.
me to say anything to her. She didn't want me to say I'm praying for you. She wanted me to write about how she was feeling. And
Yeah.
yeah, you just have to trust that the person that's grieving knows what's actually best for them. So,
Mm.
yeah, and that can be difficult. We want to fix things.
I honestly feel that silence can make a huge world of difference, and a lot of times people are not comfortable with silence in
Mm,
itself. I think that's like the question or the problem in the first instance. Like, even in romantic relationships, right? There are times when
yeah,
you see people, and I'm like, yeah, I just want the knowledge of the fact that you're just sitting down there is enough. We don't have to have something to talk about, and you should actually bask in that moment where
Mm-hmm.
everything is quiet, and that in itself should be enough. And I really feel that when it comes to grief, you never know how to handle it until you've probably experienced it yourself. And so for me, every single anecdote that you've offered on Yenshi, I'm sure it actually comes from a place of actually feeling or knowing what it's like to mourn somebody that you love. And because you felt that, you're in a better position to, preempt what another person who is currently going through it is feeling, and then to find the perfect position or posture to have. So I'm definitely loving this conversation. I love all the different shifts and form. Everybody's forming grief therapy here. Now we're done. Anyways.
Not grief therapy.
Oh well.
I think the best grief therapist was Henrietta, actually.
Really?
She was actually. I thought Louisa was the best, but I mean, I'm biased. Nate and Louisa are my favorites. So yeah.
The reason why I say so is because I would say that there was a turnaround within that period of interaction with Henrietta, right? Even though the startling part of the turnaround was after the phone call, but there was still a turnaround around that time. That was when the rays of the sun started to come through our hearts slowly. So I'll take Henrietta as my star of the book.
Okay. That's interesting. Nobody said that before.
Yeah, very short appearance, but very, 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 very tangible.
Profound,
because
right?
many housekeepers in lodgings, she could as well have just gone there to do her job.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, but leaving food the first time and not stopping to leave food was a significant moment in that person's life.
Yeah.
That is so good, Shay. But I want to move on from the typical Nigerian. I talk about the love bit. Oh my god, the part that came alive the most to me about the book is that bond Eve and Q shared, and I'm like, Kai, Jesus.
But that love is not real.
When? Shay, what do you mean?
I'm not gonna lie.
I'm saying, men are just very strange. They are.
I'm not gonna lie.
Kai.
No, but guess what? No. It's not about men, because the person she described in the book, the bulk of that love came from the guy in the story, right? But I would say that a good deal of that love is created or was created, because.
So you think there are no men like that, Shay? Is that what you're saying?
Not
this
to
is
sound
very
like
interesting.
not to sound like devil's advocate, right? Not to sound like devil's advocate. And apologies to who inspired the story, but it was so perfect that he killed himself.
Was it perfect?
That's why. That's so. No, that's what I'm saying. That's the point I'm trying to raise. That. Oh, I should have said it wasn't so perfect, but I deliberately said it was so perfect that he killed himself. So that's an irony there, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Let me listen to you.
What I was gonna say was we have to be very careful, because when we're dealing with things like mental health and so on, I don't think there's any amount of love in the world that can make somebody not go through. I'm not saying that love isn't important, and that telling people who are experiencing depression or whatever that they're loved and needed. I'm not saying that doesn't do anything, but we just have to be a little bit careful when we're talking about this, because then, like Eve did, she starts laying the blame on herself and being like, what about how I loved him or how I related to him meant that it wasn't enough for him to stay alive for me. So we just have to be and that's part of the reason I wrote it the way I did. We have to be very. It's so nuanced, and it's very nuanced, and even in Q's love, it was beautiful. You can agree, Toby. It was beautiful in many ways, but in other ways. No, but in other ways, and I've said this many times, and you may hate me for this, Toby, but if I was Eve, I would never have married Q. I wouldn't have. So
why?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Q is a dream guy. I love the chemistry between them, to be honest.
I mean, let's dive into it. I wouldn't have married him, because the way that I can't marry a guy that's not able to stand up to his family for me. Like I won't do it. Like you're not gonna brush the fact that your mother's a cow under the rug and
Yeah.
expect me to just deal with it. Like, and
Colin.
we're just gonna have to live separate lives, because for me, community is everything. If I marry
Yeah.
you, I marry your family. And if you can't
Mm-hmm.
bring us together, then what is the point?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can't advocate for me to your mother,
Your
your
mother.
only family, then what's the point? I wouldn't have married him. So,
But the thing is,
yeah.
the kind of love story you painted in that book, you paint in your book, is one that is so all consuming. And
Yeah.
I honestly feel that there's absolutely no way Eve could have been clear headed enough even to take her stand against whatever it is that she didn't really like. And it almost felt like she needed to make quite a number of compromises, right? This is someone that has actually, she's surrounded by love, she's African, she knows how communal we can be, she's not in lacking of people in that sense of the word. And I want to imagine that before Eve actually encountered Q, she probably had at the back of her mind that this is a deal breaker. If I can't deal with someone who is not in close affinity with his family, right? But when that kind of love comes into your life and it just rocks your boat, and it just came, like the guy was everything. He definitely became. He actually sort of like moved from being a deal breaker to like, oh well.
And I
Good
think
to
there was
have,
there
I
was there was a
guess.
point
Yeah.
there was a point where she had said, where she sort of saw the marriage as something that would perhaps change the attitude towards her, where it seemed like, well, there's no going back from here anyway. So but like Toby said, there was also a part where she just couldn't see any other way out of this. Love was so palpable. It
Oh
felt so,
yeah.
or there are too
I
many
love it.
butterflies.
Please.
There are too many butterflies flying.
No,
And
honestly, I get it, because I'm a massive romantic, and
Thank
she
you,
was
my
also
sister.
19. She was also
yeah, she was
19
very
when
she
he
was
wrote
Yeah,
very
it.
quite
young,
She was a
yeah,
impressive.
kid,
Yeah.
and
basically.
the
Like I
rug
didn't know
the rug
Yeah.
anything at 19.
yeah, the rug
So
had been pulled off her
yeah.
feet, so she was just flying
Yeah.
in. She was just
Yeah,
flying
absolutely.
in that
I
assurance of
love the
of
sheer
love.
innocence of it all, though. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there was a part of me, the 30 plus self, that was just like, Madam, come out of this. Like, it's just, like, really? Like, really? Seriously? I think some of those kind of romance would only find you at specific seasons in your life. And if you've actually gone beyond your mid 20s or inching towards 30s, you're a bit more realistic and pragmatic. And you're like, oh God, you
Yeah.
can't bamboozle me, please.
Yeah.
You
I
know
feel
what
like
it is?
I feel like if Eve met Q when she was like 28, it would have been a completely
Yeah,
different story. But she was
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
19. It's her first love. Like she's in a new environment. He was so
Yeah.
charming. He was the daughter.
Yeah.
She was the son of someone who, like, he's wealthy. He's beautiful. Like, I mean, yeah,
Come
I would have
on.
gotten into
Yeah.
a relationship with him at that point. But marriage, I don't know. I don't think I would. I don't
Mm.
think I would have married him.
And one thing I'll never miss in the story is the character glow.
Yeah.
Um I love how she stood up for all of them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Something that we often may have forgotten as adults now, but going through school, younger years, not just school, but even the community we may have lived, where there were some attempts at bullying. And I like that you also touched on that subject of bullying, somewhat
Mm.
very very softly. I went to a boarding house, and I think I had my fair share of being bullied because
Mm.
I'm big now, but man, I was quite smallish then. So,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
one thing that I learned later on was to fight back.
Yeah.
Right, the moment you put up a resistance, that's the moment you start to earn your freedom. And I loved how she tried to instill that fight back culture into her siblings. So it wasn't a case of you now becoming a fighter everywhere, but was a case of you standing up for yourself. The only
Mm.
problem I have with how we we may have learned to fight back as individuals, as Africans or Nigerians, but the culture that we've grown up in does not allow us fight back as a community or as a nation, because we've grown up, we've been raised in a culture of silence. We've been raised in a culture of do not talk when your elders are talking. Your elders, your older ones cannot lie. They do not lie. And so, things like that have been so instilled in us. But I like how you infuse that element of two things: the older child and the responsibility that comes on them, and how sometimes they are then able to transfer that sense of responsibility to their other siblings. And then I also like how you discuss fighting back to bullies and using that as a point to earn your own freedom.
Absolutely, yeah. Gloria is a lot of people's favorite character, because she represents the oldest daughter and then the oldest child that a lot of
Yeah.
people feel resonant, that resonate with people. And and I also have had a lot of people saying that Gloria's overbearing, she's too pushy, and I'm like, well, I get, on the one hand, I understand it, but on the other hand, I'm like, this is a woman who's fought for everything that she wanted to fight
Yeah.
for. She's risen
Yeah.
to the top of her career.
Mm-hmm.
She loves her family deeply, and she sees her younger sister, falling to pieces, and she's like, I cannot allow this to happen. She has to get better. And maybe, yes, she does overstep a few times, not letting Eve grieve in the timeline that she needs to grieve, but at the same time, she misses her sister. She wants, quite selfishly, she wants that person back that she can gist with, that she can laugh with, as the person that she knew before Q died. And so she's just very protective. She's protective of the people that she loves, and maybe she doesn't have the best way of expressing that a lot of the time, but you can see the labor that she takes on behalf of her sister, and that's a way
Yeah.
that she demonstrates her love as well. So yeah.
I'll say something about parenthood and how as Africans we're sort of blessed with that covering that parenthood brings into our lives, right? Uh, for many people, once you become an adult, you literally are left to fend for yourself, regardless of whatever you go through. But all of what you try to demonstrate with how even her dad, for instance, was still doting around her, just brought back fun memories of how no matter how old you become, many times, in many homes, once there's something, as painful as that, as grievous as that, everyone rallies together with you, just to bring you back into very positive spirits. So that was also very good for me. Nice one.
Thank you.
I was just going to say something around bullying, Shay, especially navigating it in adulthood. And I guess bullying can take different fragments, and as you
Different
begin to
forms, yeah.
evolve in life, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find yourself in a workplace where there are very nuanced or subtle form of bullying and all of that, I just wanted to highlight that sometimes you need to learn to choose your battle, right? And it's not every time you fight for yourself and
Yeah.
all of those things, because again, you just need to kind of like weigh the consequences or the cost. Like, at what cost is this going to come for me to really stand up for myself, or as an adult, can I really unlook certain things? But I honestly just feel that sometimes as you begin to evolve, maybe in childhood or in that particular context of the story, right, it makes sense to, like, for them to stand up for themselves. But as you become an adult, you just have to choose your battle. I know that there are certain things that don't even watch your breath at all, especially when you're dealing with office politics and a couple of other issues like that. But back to love. Yes.
love you, Sha.
Yes, so please.
This love,
I want
Sha.
more. Oh yeah, Shay, let me hear one. Oh yeah, I want to know what your favorite romance book is, if that makes sense. I'm just curious to know some of the books that you've actually been influenced by, that kind of like shaped or form the love
The direction
story
of
that
this
you
love story.
wrote
Mm.
in this book? Because of course I know you're an avid reader, so I have no
I'm an
doubts
avid
that.
reader. I am. But you know what? Like, there's not particular romance books that influenced that. I read abroad across the spectrum of genres, and
Mhm.
it's just little things from little places. But you know what really has really influenced, and anything I write is going to have elements of love, Toby. So there you go. It's going to have love in anything I write. But you know, it's actually just observing the relationships that I've been in, and also the relationships between my parents. My parents are the blueprint for me. Like they've been
Oh,
That is
together
so
for over
sweet.
45 years. They
my
love each
chest.
other deeply, and they just
I'm
it's the way that
touched.
my dad and my mom relate to, like, my mom even still has my dad's name saved in her phone as boyfriend. It's little things like that that
Oh.
Wow.
Mm.
they just, after being together for so long and raising three children and moving from Nigeria to Glasgow to the Isle of Man to London to here to there to every, you know, it, and that a lot of relationships don't survive such things, and if they do,
Sure.
a lot of that do survive, the love is lost a little bit. But watching my parents the way they are, watching the way that my dad's eyes light up whenever my mom walks into a room, these
Wow.
are the big things that inspire me and inspire how I describe relationships. And not all the relationships I'll write about will be fantastic, but
Mm-hmm.
what I am keen on doing is, if I do want to write a romance, like a proper romance one day, I know exactly how I'd want that to go because of the examples that I have had set for me. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's so
So was your introduction
beautiful.
of
And
the Isle of
it's
Man a tribute to them?
Yeah, kind of. And also, we lived there for 3.5 years, and I loved that place. It
Okay.
was fantastic. It was amazing.
Mm.
I was very young when I lived there, but it was like an idyllic childhood, like you see on the TV. Like nothing
Mm.
bad ever happened there. It was wonderful.
Wow.
So yeah, there was no crime
It's
on the
definitely
island. Beautiful.
wow.
So yeah.
It's definitely on my travel list for 2024. Can't wait to
Oh,
check it out.
please.
But
It's also a tax haven. It's also a tax haven. So there's some info for you as well.
nice. Thank you for letting me on that.
Yeah.
I think I'm just so glad to hear that response from you, that it's actually not like your influences of love or your perception of love were not those that are fictitious, that it's actually realistic, you're centered, and you've actually experienced it firsthand. And
Yeah.
I think it's something that is really hard to come by in this age and time. So yeah, big shout out to Onyi's parents for modeling
Amen.
that perfect love. Love story for her and for all of us who are such huge fans of, Eve and Q's love. So thank you so much for that. I really want to know what next is coming from Onye in terms of your next project. Is it going to be something equally as heavy as something maybe, or it's going to be slightly light? Just let us in.
Well,
We asked for the juice.
well, my next book is called Allow Me to Introduce Myself, and it's out
Gay,
May
gay.
2024. Pre-order. It's the pre-order link is live now. You can go and
That's my
pre-order it.
perfect birthday
Oh,
gift
And
to
wow.
myself. I'm a May baby, so I'm definitely pre-ordering.
Allow me to
I
introduce
won't say
myself.
it's definitely not. It's not as heavy as Someday Maybe, but it does deal with interesting and I think quite zeitgeist topics. It's centered around a 25-year-old girl called Anyuri, and she has been raised um, by an influencer and has been forced into the life of being a child influencer when she was a kid, and it's everything surrounding that. And it's very on trend, but I started working on this a long time ago because I could see what was coming with the whole monetizing and putting children at the forefront of the internet. I could just see
Yeah.
that there was going to be a fallout somewhere down the line. So I said, let me start writing about this. Let me start making notes. Let me start researching a little bit around this. this is what I've come out with. So I think it might ruffle a few feathers, especially amongst the parenting influences. But that's what I'm here for. I write what
Yes.
I write in my heart.
I know.
And,
I must say
and
that Onyi apparently is one that doesn't shy away from controversy. Like, if you have the qualms with our book, go write yours. That's like the vibe I
yeah,
Like
get
literally,
from every single
I'm
page. Like,
I'm the first to say I am the first to say that I'm not for everybody, and that's fine.
yeah,
I believe that
yeah,
everybody might be able to find something within my writing that resonates with them. But I'm also
yeah,
completely fine with people that hate what I write, because you're allowed to have opinions and preferences and so
yeah,
on and so forth. And that's
yeah,
absolutely fine. Like
absolutely.
when my friends are
Yeah.
like, there's somebody say, I'm like, it's okay. They're allowed to not like the book. It's fine. It's okay.
yeah, and talking about
Yeah.
introducing themselves. One thing I don't want to forget to touch on that you also did is how you sort of spotlighted the life of an artist, right? And all of the things that I don't know if you've had, some of them have occurred to you personally, but
Mm,
how in the midst of that brilliance or locked in the nucleus of that brilliance is a lot of vulnerability, is a lot of
yeah.
Mm,
there's a lot of spontaneity, and
mm,
how there's always that journey. It's either an ascendancy or some sort of descendancy, where, and when you look at the life of very, very famous artists in
mm,
music, for instance, a lot of the very, very famous pop artists, when you look at how their lives went, and even so, you talk about musicians, you talk about painters, and you see how there was. I, a lot of people have argued that that's where they drew their strength, and once that light sort of dimmed, they went into rabbit holes trying to find that light until the rabbit holes became smaller than they could come out of. So I think it's something a lot of people don't talk about as much, but it's something that really, really occurs in the lives of a lot of creatives. And so, would you say that there are ways that things like that could be better managed? Would you say that the years that we are in now, a lot of people have dealt with it in much different ways, because we no longer have situations like that. Yes, there are times when we see in the news where they say a famous artist, died in the bathtub with drugs around
Mm.
them and things like that. But what would you say is the idyllic escape for a creative or an artist?
I think it's very dependent on the person. For me,
Yeah.
I I I'm quite introverted, so literally putting on some pajamas, turning on my electric blanket and reading a book, or watching a YouTube video about
Yeah.
a South Korean cooking show, that's escapism for me, and that's absolutely fine. Or like, I don't like to leave my house unless I'm leaving the country to travel somewhere outside of the UK, and I do that a lot. I do always have something to look forward to in terms of travel. It My creativity comes alive when I'm not on this island. It comes alive when I'm elsewhere. So it's just heavily dependent on the person. If your escapism or your way of managing stress is to sleep, then make sure that your routine involves sleep where you can. If it is to talk to people, make sure that you have a circle or a therapist or a pastor or whoever that you can talk to try and alleviate some of the pressure that sits within your soul. If it is to tend to your house plants or whatever it is, just make sure that you build that. My advice would be to make sure that you section off time in order to pour into yourself. You cannot I
mm,
find I'm most creative when I'm well rested and at peace, which is why protecting my peace is extremely important for me. If you bring wahala into my life, I remove you. I cannot do it. I can't deal with it at this point in time. I have my community and my circle who I love with every fiber of my being. They keep me uplifted and I keep them uplifted. And
mm.
anything else that brings unnecessary headache, I cannot deal with, and I won't deal with it. My boundaries are iron now. They're iron clad. I can't move away from that. So yeah.
Well,
Okay, that's quite
that's such a
interesting,
good
and I
question,
think that
Shay. Yeah.
I think it's good to hear that, and I know that a lot of people have developed those kind of I wouldn't call them walls, but those kind of mechanisms around themselves,
Mm.
to help their mental states.
Mm.
Because I know that creativity sometimes can be a well. As you continue to draw from it, you hope that it's also replenished. You never want to get to the point
Yeah.
where you feel like the well has gone dry, and that's
Mm-hmm.
when for many people it starts. It's good to hear that you have a fully engaged uh, career that you're working in, right? And
Yeah, I was
so
about to say that. That's why I have a
yes,
job, a day job,
yeah,
because
yeah,
writing is such a huge part of me. It's my passion. I do
hmm,
not at this point in my life want it to become the sole thing that puts food on my table. That's just too much. That will
yeah,
draw some of the joy away from it and put too much
Yeah.
pressure on me.
exactly,
So I have my
exactly,
day job, and that does everything that I need to do. So when I can return to my writing, and yes, it does mean that it's harder because I don't have as much time as people that write full time. But at the same
hmm,
time, when I do write, I feel like it's the best of me on the page because I'm not pouring all of my creativity into my job. My job is my job,
Mm-hmm.
and my writing is my
yeah,
writing. So
yeah,
yeah.
And
yeah. I
speaking
think
of that, I'm just wondering if how you get do you get all of the maximum support that you need from like your day job for your writing? Because oftentimes when you begin to attain some level of success as a
Mm.
writer or through your talents, I know that some 9 to 5 or career begins to, you tend to start ruffling some feathers and you get to this point where you need to pick one in that
Yeah.
sense of the word. Have you ever found yourself in that place just yet, or do you envisage that happening anytime soon?
My previous job, before I started this one, they were very
Mm.
supportive, but up to a point. They introduced a new policy where you were no longer allowed to work remotely. And as soon as that happened, I said I'm going to leave because that's my non-negotiable. Wherever I work, I must be able to work remotely because there's times where I won't be in the UK. I cannot be in the
Yeah,
UK because I'll be seeing my US publishers or talking to publishers elsewhere, or doing an or whatever, or just I just need to be out of the UK so I can actually replenish my well of creativity. And
sure.
they were sad to see me go, but this job that I've been working in now, everybody is so supportive. Like from top to bottom, everybody's so supportive of the book. I don't talk about it. It's like my colleagues on my publisher, they found out and then they just spread it around the company. It's like because I don't like I because I just I don't feel like there's any comfortable way for me to be like, oh, do you know what? But they found it and they just it's like they're my hype people, my publicists within the company. They go and tell everybody, and that's really sweet because I know
Yeah,
that a lot of people
it's
don't have
rare.
that with their day
Yeah,
jobs.
you don't
Yeah,
enjoy that
so
luxury. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lovely
yeah,
to hear. Thank you. She,
yeah.
do you have any last questions?
No, I think I've had a swell time actually. I've run through a range of questions, and it's so good it was so good having these conversations with you, and I like how you allowed us to dive into all of the topics around grief. I would say that this is a very diverse bucket of topics.
Mhm.
Putting love and grief in one bucket is not something that comes
Yeah.
very often. And so I would say again, thank you for the gift of your book. It was such a delightful read. As much as, like you would say, it has come with different reactions, right? But not many people will understand the importance of those conversations, because many of us want to just live life on the fast lane, on the happy lane, and always on the positive side. But the reality of life is that's not all that life is about. There would always be
Mhm.
instances where you would have to learn, if not how to handle grief as a person, it's how to help other people through their points of
And to
grief.
live with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You would also learn really how to love. Like Toby has said, that was such a sweet love story, and maybe
Yeah.
some of the brothers are reading it and they're like, "Oh, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this." Just maybe.
pressure, brothers. No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah. But no,
Just maybe.
it's like it's interesting you say that grief and love, because I can't remember who said it, but somebody did say that grief is just love with that has nowhere else to go. So
Yeah.
I think that's so it's such a beautiful sentiment, and it rings true for me anyway when I think
Mhm.
about grief and love. And
Mhm.
it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both. You are the only ones that have not asked me about the note. Everybody asks me about the note, and you didn't even bring it up. So
No,
you know what? That's it.
no, no. Yeah, so many more
Yeah.
interesting stuff to talk about
Yeah.
aside from the note. Trust me. So
Yeah.
this has been really wholesome. I'm really glad that we had this conversation. It's totally worth the wait for me. And beyond all of the things, all the serious stuff, I think for me it was just the sweetness of the words, how they all come together to make. I'm such a huge fan of words, and how
Yeah.
you write so skillfully stands out, and it continues to shine and stand you out as a writer. And I just really want to hope that your next body of work is even more flowery, it's even more beautiful, that it really excites or evoke that, happiness. And that wherever you're, how you might, there is, I read some sentences in the book and I'm like, gosh, I love her mind. Where did she come up with that? Like, I'm that crazy. Maybe because my background, of course, is also in English, and
Yeah.
my 95 is also around forms, but it takes some level of mastery for you to be able to do such powerful stuff with words.
Is there a
And
movie
you do
coming
that.
soon?
We hope so. We hope so.
They should not spoil the book for us, please.
No.
If they're not going to do justice to
We'd
it.
love to see an
That's the
adaptation.
thing. Like, I want to see it on screen, but it has to be done properly. Otherwise, I'll be
Yes.
devastated. That's the thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to be done properly. But I think
Yes.
if you enjoyed the love and the floweriness in this book, Toby, the next one that's coming in May, you will also enjoy. So,
Yeah. I already told you it's going to be my
Uh,
birthday gift to myself.
we
I
ra-
can't wait for the
we,
period link to be
we
off.
raise a
The
glass
May
to
baby
allow
is
me to
definitely going to
introduce
be.
myself.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Raise
Definitely
a
go for.
glass.
And that subject matter, I think, is so proactive of you to really address it, because at some
Yeah.
point it will become an endemic, and a lot
Yeah.
of people are yet to be aware of it. For you having that foresight, sit down and
Yeah.
begin to take notice, is really exceptional. Thumbs up.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
And
doing
hopefully
that.
you'll invite me back. Hopefully you invite me back to talk about that one as well.
Yes,
So
I can't wait.
We look forward to that as
May
well.
is
We look
almost
forward to
here.
that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a
Oh, it's
blast
a pleasure.
having you here. Like, I had such a good time. Like,
You guys, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure and a delight to meet you. And I'm so glad we could make this happen. It really has been great.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. On
Yeah,
that
thank you
note,
very
it's
much.
goodbye from us, everyone. Catch you next time on the next episode of the What Reading Podcast. Ciao, guys.